There's a massacre underway. A deliberate, calculated slaughter of Christians in Syria. Their blood staining the sand, their screams echoing in the ruins of ancient churches that once stood as bastions of faith and civilization. And yet, the world is silent. Western leaders, those champions of human rights, those self-anointed arbiters of morality, they look away. The same politicians who will grandstand about Islamophobia at the drop of a hat will not spare a single word for the Christian families being hacked to death, their children butchered, their women brutalized by Islamist death squads. In Syria, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, an offshoot of al-Qaeda, has unleashed a wave of terror against Christians and Alawite Muslims. A young family was murdered in cold blood. Mother, father, their infant child slaughtered for the crime of their faith. A father and son, Tony and Fadi Patrus, executed by Islamists. And this carnage is not random. It's not the fog of war. It's systematic. It's the policy of those now running Syria, a government propped up by Western complicity and cowardice. Remember Tulsi Gabbard's warning when she said, "I just hate al-Qaeda. I hate that our leaders cozy up to Islamist extremists, calling them rebels"? She was right. They weren't rebels. They're terrorists. And now they run Syria. A man who danced in the streets on 9/11, who celebrated the deaths of thousands of Americans, is now leader of Syria. And he's turned his sights on Syria's dwindling Christian population. Of course, this is not the first time Christians have been targeted for extermination in the Middle East. The Yazidis of Iraq suffered under Islamic State's genocidal campaign. Coptic Christians in Egypt have been bombed in their churches. Nigerian Christians are slaughtered by Boko Haram and Fulani militants. Armenian Christians have been driven from their homes, their churches destroyed, desecrated. And yet, time and time again, Western governments do nothing. Or worse, they enable it. What did the Biden administration do before it was mercifully removed from power? They sought to cozy up to these so-called moderate rebels. They sanctioned and weakened Assad, the only force that stood between Syria's Christians and total annihilation. They lifted sanctions on Iran, a regime that funds and arms jihadists across the region. And the United Nations, the same corrupt institution that continuously demonizes Israel while ignoring the worst atrocities committed by Islamist regimes. Oh, they say they're deeply concerned, but they'll do nothing. Meanwhile, churches burn across Canada. And what about Canada? What about Justin Trudeau, our preening, self-righteous, soon-to-be ex-prime minister, who never misses an opportunity to weep over the supposed injustices of the past? What has he done for the Christians of Syria? The answer is nothing, less than nothing. While churches burn across Canada, while Christian pastors were thrown in prison for daring to hold services during the pandemic, while the desecration of Christian symbols goes unpunished, our government turned a blind eye. When over 100 churches were vandalized, torched, or destroyed in this country, did Trudeau condemn it? Did he stand up for religious freedom? No. Instead, he mused about the understandable anger that might lead someone to burn down a church. Can you imagine him saying that if they were mosques or synagogues? Of course not. In this new progressive Canada, Christianity is the enemy. Our values, our traditions, our faith, the relics of a past Trudeau and his ilk want erased. The systematic persecution of Christians abroad is mirrored by the creeping oppression of Christians right here at home. We're ridiculed in the media, silenced on social platforms, prosecuted by a legal system that bends over backwards to accommodate every ideology except ours. And let's be clear, this is intentional. It's a feature, not a bug, of the modern globalist regime. The Christian faith is the bedrock of Western civilization. It's what built our laws, our ethics, our culture. And that is precisely why it's under attack. Because a society rooted in Christianity can't be easily manipulated. It can't be ruled by fear. It can't be cowed into submission. A society that believes in eternal truths, in God's justice, will not be swayed by the latest woke hysteria or bullied into compliance by government edicts. And so they seek to destroy it. This is why our churches are burning. This is why pastors are arrested. This is why Christians in Syria are massacred with impunity. Because in the eyes of the elites, in the eyes of the bureaucrats and the technocrats and the puppet politicians, we are an obstacle, a problem to be managed, a nuisance to be erased. But they underestimate us. They always have. The faith that survived the lions of the Colosseum won't bow to the petty tyrants of our age. The church that stood through the persecutions of Diocletian and the terror of the Ottoman sword will not be silenced by the sneering contempt of a Justin Trudeau or the apathy of a United Nations committee. We must act, not just in words, but in deeds. We must demand action from our leaders, demand that the West stops funding and supporting jihadists who slaughter Christians. Demand that Canada opens its doors to persecuted Christians rather than prioritizing those who despise our values. Demand that our churches be defended, that our pastors be protected, that our faith be given the respect that it deserves. We have to remember the martyrs. We must remember the martyrs, not just in prayer, but in action. The Christians of Syria need us. The Christians of Nigeria need us. The Christians in China's underground churches, the Christians imprisoned in North Korea, the Christians attacked in Pakistan, they all need us. And we must not abandon them. To my fellow Christians, I'll say this. Don't despair. Don't retreat. The world may hate us, but we don't answer to the world. We answer to God. And if our faith has taught us anything, it's that darkness does not win. Evil does not triumph. And as history has shown us time and time again, when they try to bury us, they only plant seeds. The world may turn its back on the Christians in Syria, but we must not. We must speak out. We must tell their stories. We must not allow their martyrdom to be in vain. Because in the end, justice will come. And those who stand against the people of God will learn, as so many before have learned. His justice will not be mocked. Hey, this is Richard Serrett. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe.